Cool.
Yeah.
Continue. There we go.
Okay. Hi, John. Wonderful to see you again. And it's
Indeed.
been a few years, right? Like I last saw you at a
Yeah.
speaking show, maybe.
I was thinking about that. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago when last I saw you in person, when I remember it was here in Portland
It
with
was in Portland.
Stickman
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
snow and ice. And I was shocked you guys even made the gig because it was treacherous out there. And because I'm from Boston originally, right, and spent so much time there, my friends that I went to the show with insisted that I had to drive because I'm the snow guy, right? I know about this stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting. Huh? And I think I also remember seeing you at a show in Boston, at the
Yes.
something cafe.
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
I know I saw you in, and it's one of the great jazz clubs in Cambridge. And
Yeah,
yeah,
Cambridge.
that
Yes.
was actually a great show. I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
then
like I'm just trying to remember when I first heard of you, and it's crazy to think about that, but it must be like 25 years at least,
Well, that's what
something like that.
yeah, I mean, when I did my first proper record and I had started the label and I was working with Torn and Tony,
Hmm.
and yeah, that was what, 1996.
Yeah, yeah. So were you on the Lupus Delight mailing list like from the
Yes,
very beginning as
exactly,
well?
exactly.
Yeah,
Back
so
in the
that's where we
yeah,
met,
I
right?
know that's where we began.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because there were some really great people involved in all of that. And it got stupid after a little while, um, but what's funny is all these years later, so many of us are now sort of coming together in this way. And just this morning, I was listening to Mike Bearpark, who was on there.
Hmm.
And there's a new dark room coming that I played on a couple of years ago. I went over and did a session with them.
Hmm.
That's finally going to see the light of day, I think, later this year. But I mean, it's a riot that.
It is.
So,
Yeah, I think it's just fascinating because as a younger person, you don't know how these things go, right? Like
right,
you don't know like what is 30 years? Like I have no idea as a 20-year-old, right?
right.
So
You can't comprehend it. I know.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah. And we still kind of like know each other, and it's this circle and it's expanding, right? But there's also like the core people that are still working and
Yep.
are still having a career, and we know
Yeah.
like in our circles where it's, let me just say this, I think it's true, where it's more about the music than something else.
Any commercial implications? Yeah. Right.
and
Uh-huh.
it's kind of fascinating but I think like especially that fact that it's more than a hobby, but it's not something that really you have to do in order to make a living. Sort of
Mhm.
enables these long-term friendships and long-term development also of artistic visions.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Because I talked about this with Stefan a lot. The
Mhm.
fact that he and I are both in a similar situation. We don't have to worry about, if this record doesn't sell,
Yeah,
are we going to be able to put food on the table?
yeah,
So for us, it really opens up all kinds of possibilities for what do we really want to do musically. and
yeah.
and I think that similar mindset is kind of why he and I in the past 2 years have done so much work. And
Uh-huh.
um, I mean, I'm really happy to be involved in all of that. I think there's some great things. I mean, goodness, what we all put together on the Fractal Guitar 2 was just so special. I mean, your
Yeah,
playing is amazing. Torn, always, uh, Henry.
yes, yeah. And it's not the end. It's not the end, it's
No, for
still very
sure.
much still in progress. And
There's plenty more to be said and done. So,
like
yeah.
one of the mistakes I used to make was thinking that any current project is like, let's say, that one statement that changes everything, right? And then I realized, oh no, it's just another stepping stone, right? And
It's just another one along the way. And,
yeah, yeah,
tomorrow we're going to wake up and you and I are both going to have something different on our plate musically than we
yeah,
had today.
yeah, exactly.
So,
And
yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful. So you were talking about Stefan Thelen, so I'm just mention that for people. And before we go kind of like to this day and future releases and stuff. So tell me, well, I really don't know what you're doing for a living, so that would be interesting to know, but also like your history, like how you got into, how your love for music developed. If you're
Sure.
interested in that.
Sure. It started in my youth, and I have a real distinct memory of hearing Roundabout by Yes when I was 8 years old, whenever it came out. And that moment that just clicks in your brain that says, this is what I'm about. This is what matters to me. And from that point forward, I have just been completely obsessed with music. And my grandfather designed church organs and played them and played piano and taught music at a private school for most of his life. So music was always a part of our existence growing up. And I have an uncle who's actually in the Hall of Fame as a baseball writer, but he also is a rock and roller, and he's as known for his rock and roll as he is for his baseball understanding. And he lived with us when we were kids, and I still remember him. He would play records for us, and I can remember hearing the Yardbirds song Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor when I was, I don't know, 3 years old or something. And Jimmy Page, does the bowing guitar in the middle of that tune. And I somehow or other, even at that age, I understood what was actually happening. And years later, when I heard the song, as an adult, I was like, I could picture that moment hearing it on the floor of our house, as a kid. So it's always been there, I have another funny one from when I was a kid. I was in a class, probably like sixth grade or something. So I was maybe 12, and you'll appreciate the song because I had this moment in my head where I could actually hear the song, hear all the parts, and have like a mixing console in my head. So I could isolate the drums, I could isolate the guitar, the bass, the vocals. It was Exiles by King Crimson. And the teacher apparently was yelling at me because I'm spacing out in class, right? I'm just like playing with this mixing console in my head. And I had no idea, right? So I think it's always kind of been there, right?
Yeah, but then it needs to become sort of like a lot of practicalities involved to kind of get into it.
Yeah. So then, I initially went to Berklee College of Music, and I actually, like a lot of people, I ran away screaming because it was this, everybody's taught the same, to play the guitar the same way. These are the founding, methodologies by which we do this. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, I played in a wedding and realized that this is how most people coming out of Berklee are making their living. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't do it. I was like, this is just not an option for me. And so I instead went and got a marketing degree.
So how long did you last at Berklee? Like a year or
a year?
Less?
Yeah,
a year.
Yeah, so I got a marketing degree and went to work initially for a hi-fi company, stereo equipment, and then went from there to Lexicon. And I spent 6-7 years working for Lexicon before David Torn said, "You got to start this record label." And we saw this change, the way the internet was going to, changed the whole world and how we think about music. And initially we saw it as a way to kind of get people out of the middle between the artist, the label, and the buyer, which is kind of what's happened. But along the way, we didn't foresee CDs going away. We didn't see, at the time, the idea that you would be able to download a whole album was miles away. I mean, we were still on 14.4 modems at that point, right?
Yes.
The idea that we were, the way we're making records today, right? Transferring files back and forth, that wasn't an option, right? And it wasn't, I certainly didn't see that. But in any case, it was a really interesting time. And at that point, I had young kids, and they were, like 1 and 4. And my wife and I kind of looked at each other and said, look, my wife's job is really good. She's an accountant. She's, a gutter master's, and she's working for a really good company and doing really well. One of us needs to be home, and it probably ought to be me, because, I'm never going to be the one making a ton of money. And so this was a great opportunity for me to start this label, get some really interesting music out there with people like Wayne Krantz and Leanie Stern. We had Gary Willis, Michael Manring did a record for me. And it was a really cool and interesting time. And about 3 years in, everything changed, and all the distributors started one by one going bankrupt, out of business. And
so can you give us the timeline, like which year was
that? Would have been about 1999. I started the label in 1996. About 1999 to 2000 was when Borders went out of business, Tower went out of business. My distributors one by one started going, and it was just, it ended up being a really ugly time to be a label. And so at that point, I stopped releasing albums by other artists. I just kind of, from there on, it was just going to be me. And since then, I've continued making records. I had a period from about 2007 to 2011 where I stopped making records and focused entirely on my kids, and actually had a band with them, which was great fun. When we started, they were 11 and 14. And we were playing things by Porcupine Tree and Foals and Sigur Rós, and just having a blast, right? And taught my kids how to be in a band. And now they're both in bands, and really, things that teenagers, I would make them come prepared, right? So I don't crack the whip hard, but I'm like, we're going to play this tune. There's nothing you can't play. Just, work on it so that when the band gets together, where we are, and pain in the ass dad thing now, they're like, thank you so much. You taught me so much about how to be ready to do this,
it's incredible. You're a great dad.
It was great fun. Yeah. We had a really good time, and funnily enough, we're talking about trying to have a reunion with the drummer was actually my drummer from high school, and he lives nearby, and we got together and played and had such a good time that we pulled the kids in and did all that for 4 years, and then. Life goes on.
So how did it feel not to make records? Did you miss it, or?
I didn't really miss it. I felt like I didn't really know what I wanted to say for a while musically. Mm-hmm. I was like, we go in cycles where, the creativity is high and then it ebbs, and then it's high and then it ebbs. And I was just in a low spot with that. And I felt like, I'm not going to make a record just to make a record. I have to have something to say. And that was when I came out of it, that was the start of what's been a really super creative 10, 12 years now. And a lot of that, what came out of it was that after my last album before taking a break, Flood, my older son and I had really gotten into Porcupine Tree, and they were playing in New York at the Beacon Theater, and in Boston they were playing a 21 plus show. So I couldn't bring him to see them there. So, but it was a weekend, and so he and I went and had a guys' weekend. And Tony Levin had been opening for them in Europe. And so I sent him a note saying, "Hey, I'm bringing my son, and he's a bass player and wants to meet Colin." And so Tony arranged for us to get backstage passes to meet Colin. And that ended up being how he and I, Colin Edwin and I, became musical partners. Because when I started writing what became my album, Dance of the Shadow Planets, initially I was thinking it would be, Tony playing it. And then I started listening to the bass lines that I was coming up with. And I said, no. Those are Colin Edwin bass lines. And so sent him a note saying, "Hey, do you remember we met up in New York?" And he said, "Yeah. And I listened to your record and I think it's great and cool. I'd love to." And it turns out that was right when they split up.
Mm-hmm.
And
hey,
so
let me tell you something about this, because this may be interesting. Like, I never really wondered why you guys had met, because I think you guys are a perfect match.
That was the funny part about it. We were, I mean, that first meeting, we just sat there, he and I and my son, and we spent an hour just talking.
Yeah.
Just, as just person to person, interesting people and same sort of mindset and all these things. And you're absolutely right. It is like when we started working together, he got the demos and he started working on them. And the first thing he said to me when he landed was, he said, "I was playing these the night before I left, and my wife came downstairs," which is something she never does, "to ask what it was I was working on." Right. and he said, it's just, this great combination. And we cut that whole album live in the studio, and it was just such a great vibe between everybody involved that the next let's see, so we recorded that in like March. It came out in September. In January, I just sent him a Happy New Year note, and he said, "So what are we doing next?" And I said, "Well, I've had a couple ideas, but they're kind of the same thing as what we just did." And he said, "Well, I have an idea. Let's try writing together." And so we start sending files back and forth, and it's been nonstop since then. We've just always found this great sense of, John's going to like this. He'll come up with a bass line or whatever this is great for John. I'll come up with an idea that's perfect for him. And we really seem to, finish each other's sentences musically. It's really cool. Mm-hmm. And I feel so badly too, when we did the first Progtoberfest, you guys were on the other stage the same time we were on. We were both closing the show, right? And so we couldn't see each other other than 2 seconds before. And I felt so bad because I wanted to see you guys. I know you guys.
I remember that now. I remember that now. Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, oh, terrible timing. But
I've never spoken to Colin. I'd really like to at some point.
You should. He's such a great guy, and so just deep knowledge, and but also fun and friendly, and yeah, you'd have a great conversation with him. It's you'd enjoy it.
I remember like one of the few albums that I was binging, let's say, was Returning Jesus by No Man,
Uh-huh.
like which is Stephen and Tim
Yep.
Bowness, right?
Yep.
And he plays bass on that, and like
Yep.
those parts were so beautiful, and that's where I became aware of him first. I wasn't really so much into the Porcupine Tree band,
Right.
so I didn't pay that much attention. But yeah,
They came late for me too. Um, but I knew I had heard him on the he played on a Jensen Barbieri Karn record along with Torn, and I immediately picked up on this really cool fretless bass and said, oh, this guy's got something going. And so when I finally got into Porcupine Tree, it was great. The band just really hit all sort of the right notes for me at the time. And yeah.
it's funny how everything is connected there. Like in these musical scenes in particular, you can kind of like see, okay. And like I have to say, I had completely forgotten that you were working for Lexicon. Now,
Yes.
I had completely forgotten about that, and that also explains why you were in the studio for the Polytown
Right.
album,
Right.
for the recording
Exactly.
of that. Like one of my favorite albums ever.
Oh gosh, yes. It's still sort of fresh in my mind being there, even though what year was that? 91? It was a long time ago. And I remember, I went up to Burlington to just hang in the studio with them for a little while. And it was just such a great experience. So many interesting things were happening, in the course of the one day. And the funny part too is that I had, actually, now that I think about it, it would have been 93 because my first son had just been born. And so I didn't stay overnight, and I left the studio at about midnight and drove home through the night, and it's about 5 hours for me to get home, and arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning just shattered. But it was great. That whole album, I remember there was the solo on one of the tunes that Torn cut while I was there, and my immediate reaction was, I want more. And he said, no. This is all it needed. This, just a few bars of just this wonderful Tornisms. And he was right.
So the label was or is Alchemy Records?
Alchemy Records, yeah.
Yeah. And so ever since the business changed so much, you started to kind of like release your stuff on the label, and not okay. I see.
Yeah.
Sort of like the way it went for a lot of people, actually.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and I tell people now, you really don't want to be on a label. I mean, it's great if they're going to do some marketing, but most of them aren't going to do any marketing for you, and so they're only going to take money away from you.
Yes. Exactly.
So you're really better off just doing it yourself now. And I mean, it's a really weird time to try to be a musician. And I feel badly for anyone coming out of, a place like Berkeley where what are you going to do? And especially in the pandemic, right? Okay. So our drummer in Burnt Belief, Vinny Sabatino, fabulous drummer. And, he plays in a wedding band. That's his gig. And for a long time, they made a lot of money. They did really well. They used to have a lead singer named Ray Green, who left the band to join Tower of Power, and then left them to join Carlos Santana.
Wow.
And they replaced him with a guy named Jermaine Paul, who actually won this TV show, The Voice. I don't know if you know about that show, right? Big American, contest thing. And I mean, this is the sort of, and the bass player was Baron Brown, who used to play with Jean-Luc Ponty and Steve Smith and Billy Cobham and, all these fusion grades. But you can't make a living doing that anymore. So,
Yeah, it's like everything that kind of like used to work just isn't working anymore. And
yeah.
I came right at the time when the business started crumbling. Like my
Right.
first solo CD was I released it in early '98.
Yeah.
And I was lucky kind of because I had already done some networking on the internet between 93 and 98, like 5 years, right?
Yeah.
Of being on those mailing lists and writing to DJs and stuff like that. So I was kind of like prepared. I think I only did 300 copies initially, and like 150 copies I sent out to people I had met online.
Right. Sure.
And that was kind of like the start of it. And then the very first deal I had was with Ian Boddy on Din Records. And that was a 50-50 split situation. So I was never involved in any of the old ways of treating musicians.
Right.
So and I have to say, I mean, it's a deep topic. Lots of difficult things here, and like for example, right now, like we have had some problems with our tax advisor, like the bookkeeping and stuff. And now it turns out that like just even assigning the lines in Bandcamp in the Bandcamp report sheet properly. Took them like for 1 year of reporting, took them like 9 hours to do.
Oh, jeez.
So if you can just imagine that cost, you deduct that from the little money you're making off of Bandcamp. Well, I mean, and we're actually making a lot of.
We're doing a lot better with Bandcamp than without it. I'll tell you that.
So, but the business is just that business is just so insane and really, and I think that maybe I think you'd agree that making records has become sort of like a way of being around, of kind of like showing what you do, and then sort of like you have a job, right? Or you used to have a job. I don't know if
I used to have a job. My wife still has a really good job. So
so it's awesome. That's awesome.
We get to live comfortably, and I get to make music. It's a great thing.
That's fantastic. So, but it's really that if we want to make art, we need to have other sources of income, actually.
Oh, for sure.
And that's sort of like it's a reality, and it's And I mean, like how many records have you put out, like on your label?
So, let's see. The total. So the new one is number 39, which technically, because I started at 5 for no good reason, so 34 altogether between all the various albums that have come out on the label. And in some cases that almost doesn't count because they're it's more like 30, because there were a couple of singles that got just released it, but it needs a catalog number, so it became a catalog number. And I did the 2 things with Peter Chilvers this past year, that one was an EP, one was a full album, and all because we just made too much music and just felt like all of it needed to come out. But
but still, it's on average, it's one release per year, right?
It has been, but in the last year, it's just bumped up exponentially. I've done in the last 2 years 6 albums because just so many things have just happened, and so many people like Peter Chilvers, like Stefan Thalen, who finally said, "Oh, Jon, let's work together." And I said, "Sure, let's go." And
And please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me also that a lot about, and I mean it in the best way possible, a lot about your sound has come together also like in a very, very, very strong way. Like, would you
It did.
agree?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, definitely. I felt like just a lot happened when I picked up the fretless guitar, and that was the third Burnt Belief album, so like 2016,
Mhm.
and I had. I mean, the history for me with the fretless guitar goes all the way back to 1978 when I saw a guy named Randy Roos open for John McLaughlin at Berkeley. And he utterly blew my mind. I mean, I walked away going, I like this guy better than McLaughlin. And he ended up being my teacher a couple of years later. And and we're still really good friends. I just emailed with him yesterday. And for the longest time, I wasn't going to approach playing fretless guitar because of him, because it was like, how could I possibly touch this thing that he had such a huge impact on me with? And then my brother Kingsley showed up one day with a fretless guitar that he'd had built for him, and put it in my hands.
Mhm.
And as soon as I started playing, I knew I had no choice. This was like, it was there, right? It was this voice that I had that was just waiting for me, and all the things that I would do with the whammy bar, pulling up and sliding it around and doing all these things. All of a sudden, now it's all just in my left hand, and it just opened all sorts of doors up. And yeah, that was a huge change for me, and a really positive one. So
Yeah, isn't it amazing how the control, let's say, you have over the tone and the connection with the tone sort of
mhm.
is more than just it just, as you say, it opens many doors, and it's like, if you think about it, like, it's not that you're subdividing, really, it's not you're dividing the string, right? It's you are actually it changing that. Is There's no fret, like there's movement to
Exactly.
every single note. And
It is, and it's what it is to me is it's an almost vocal connection. It's
yeah.
like I can really feel how I would say sing this phrase, right,
Mhm.
through my hands, and
Yeah.
I
It's
yeah,
the expressiveness that goes way up when you have an instrument that's fretless. And
yes,
like I'm playing a fretted instrument, and for me, like, whenever I try to play a keyboard instrument, for example, like, it may be triggering even the same sound that I would trigger from my guitar, right? It's not the same. It just is not the same. Like the way you can kind of like dig in with your skin, the contact of your skin with the string, and
totally.
then have that as the fretless thing is just amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a funny thing, right? We have this visceral connection between our hands and our instrument, and in both of our case, because we play fretted or fretless stringed
Yeah.
instruments, that sensation is very different from the keyboards that you see behind me. And I do fumble around with keyboards and have been using them more and more in the last year, but it's not the same. But funnily, when I have MIDI on my guitar and I can play, I'll do mini Moog solos on the guitar. I'll play various keyboard parts. But when it comes to piano, I need to put my hand here on the keys, because
Yes.
the tactile sensation, if I want a piano, it's not the same. And I can trigger it on the guitars, and it's not the same.
No, of course not. Of course not. It
So,
can't be, because
no,
it's always a combination of the sound source and the controller, right? If we want
yes,
to,
exactly.
and that's what makes the stringed instruments, and especially the fretless instruments, so extremely unique, because it becomes both. Both worlds merge when your
Yes.
finger touches the string. And there's like one detail that about guitar playing that people hardly ever mention, that I've discovered works really well when you teach guitar. is to make people aware that if you pluck a string and you fret it, you can actually feel the vibration of that pitch within your fingertip, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it's super obvious, but people don't talk about it. And I find it very important because that's the immediate feedback you
Yes.
have. You don't need to amplify your instrument in order to hear that, to feel that.
No,
right?
to really feel it exactly. And if you teach them to focus on that, then that will help them grasp how the fingering works, how it changes the tone, how it,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, yeah, let's jump around a little bit. So your history of the guitar, you said that you went to Berkeley. That was with an electric, I'd say, I guess, right? So, but what was your first guitar?
Let's see. So when I was 12, I got my first guitar, and it was an acoustic guitar, and it was like an Epiphone steel string acoustic. Yep. And I played around, but I knew I wanted to play electric. I mean, all the music that I was listening to, all the guitar players I was hearing, they're all electric players. And I got my first electric when I was 14, and I spent that year working in a market to earn enough money to buy an amplifier. And I still have that. I bought a Lab Series L5, and I still proudly have that amp.
Wow.
It's pretty abused at this point, but it
still great. Works.
Yeah. In fact, it was funny. My younger son plays guitar, and he's gotten extremely good. And he and I pulled it out when I was back east this past summer, and he came down for a day to visit with me, and we're handing a guitar back and forth and playing through that amp. The two of us just kept looking at each other like, why haven't we played this all along? Yeah. So that was, so I got like a copy of a Telecaster was my first electric. And then when I was 16, I got my first Stratocaster. And that was like a big step, right? And interestingly, so that was right after, that was 1980. And the summer before that, I'd had the great opportunity to do one of those tours that, the best high school jazz musicians in the country, right? Which really means the best high school jazz musicians whose parents can afford to send them on one of these tours, right? Because some of the players were great and some were not. But we got to play in the Montreux Jazz Festival and, toured all over, and it was great. It was a fabulous experience. And yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of logical that you went to Berkeley, right? It wasn't
just, exactly.
I see.
Yeah.
But I find it extremely like you must have been really very aware of yourself to kind of make that call and leave that school to do something else.
Yeah, I was. I knew that, like I say, you play one wedding and you can either do this or you can't. And the fact is, at the time, I was so wrapped up in listening to ECM records, that anything else, I wasn't moved by it. And if I'm not moved by it, it's hard for me to pick up the guitar to play, something that doesn't move me. It really was it was an obvious choice on my part when I realized, I've got to walk away from this.
So for me, just for you to know, like when I decided not to study music, which was on the table for a while, it actually made me really, I was really relieved. And I was actually practicing, and I had a lot of fun with the instrument. Like it really was,
because
I was
the pressure was off.
Yeah, the pressure was off, and I was studying psychology, which was hard, right?
Right.
But somehow somehow doing two things, which both took time away,
Sure.
you could say.
Mhm.
Like it was much easier to study and to study, right?
Sure. Because your focus on psychology is, you're focusing on this with an eye towards, okay, there's a viable livelihood here somewhere.
Yeah.
Whereas with music, there studying music at a high level requires the same amount of time and discipline with minimal outcome and an incredible amount of, an incredible amount of pressure
And frustration.
and frustration from, it's hard to explain. There's a lot of people that view like music education almost as like a sport, right? There's this pressure to perform exactly, and it's very intense, and it's very competitive. It's like, you have to be as good as this guy over here who's winning this competition, and music to me was never a competition. It was never been, and it never, all the musicians that I like, and this goes for you, it's people that I can hear you play one note and I go, oh, there's Marcus, right? Alan Holdsworth, one note, it's Alan, right? People like that are the ones that inspired me. And to this day, it's the same thing. It's you can have all the chops in the world, but if you're playing something that's kind of generic and it doesn't move me. And I don't know why, but from day one, that was the way I was inspired.
Hey, let's think about the implications of what we're saying for young people who kind of like it can be pretty much disillusioning, right? Like,
yeah. Sorry, I'm a downer, aren't I?
Yeah, no, but and I'm serious about this. Like, what's the alternative? Like, kind of like what could we? How could we help them, right? Like, what could we say that would help them?
Well, I think it comes down to inspiration. To me, music has always been and always should be about inspiration. So, whatever it is that inspires you, and it doesn't matter whether you like my music or anybody else's. It doesn't matter what it is. If it inspires you, then that's a wonderful thing. And that, to me, that quest for finding something new that's exciting and challenging and makes you feel like, when I hear a piece of music that moves me, like goosebumps come up, and it's just right. Tears start flowing, and you start going, this is what it's about. And it's not, again, it doesn't matter whether it's your music, my music, or Bach, or it's music.
I was once teaching a master class at one of the big schools for popular music here in Germany, and it was a class for guitarists. And I asked them, like, which music are you inspired by? And they really couldn't answer. They couldn't give me an answer. That was so shocking to me.
That's sad.
Super sad. Yeah, and they didn't even know the names of guitarists. Like, you believe it or not, but one guy was saying Slash. I mean, I have no problem with Slash, but
that's
but
fine. But
it was just so interesting that people can actually get into schools like that without seemingly having a passion for the subject matter.
That's interesting. That is very, because when my kids were taking music lessons, there's a music school that they went to, a community music school near our home outside Boston, and I had a conversation because I got on the board there and spent a few years working on the board and helping them. And I had a conversation with the president about that very sort of thing, because we were talking about a couple different students, one of whom was like an 11-year-old prodigy who could play all kinds of really amazing things on piano until you took the music away. And then there was nothing. He couldn't, he could read perfectly, but he couldn't, he didn't think music. He had learned to just play the notes. And then there were other students who could really play, but couldn't necessarily read. They were more natural, sort of fluid, and the question was always how do you find the balance and what's more important? And to me, what was important was, well, the kid might, the prodigy might find the passion one day, hopefully, if something, but somebody's got to instill it in him, I think, and point him in that direction. And the other ones already have it. So, then it's a matter of, now we got to work on some fundamentals. But it's an interesting challenge, isn't it? It's that it was always obvious to me. So nobody ever had to tell me, and I don't know how, I saw it with my own kids. My older son didn't express a lot of interest in various sports or whatever. He would try them, he would do them. And he took up the bass. And it was like a lot of things. He was kind of fumbling with it. And then he, the end of his freshman year in high school, he asked if I would get him the songbook for Stadium Arcadium by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And he spent the entire summer just kind of locked in his room woodshedding on Flea's bass lines and taught himself to play the bass because he really wanted to. But his bass teacher didn't know how to draw that out of him. And I tried to be hands-off in terms of teaching. It was great being in the band with them, but I wasn't going to be your teacher, And but he found it. He completely taught himself what he needed to do to be able to play Flea's bass lines, and that was great. But it was entirely his own passion for it. So
it's like this. I've been traveling a lot. I've been in the US a lot, and so I kind of like, not that I'm trying to actively compare cultures, but it happens.
Yeah, and there's no getting around it.
What I find kind of like really detrimental in a way is when I see, and I've seen this both over there in the US as well as in Europe, is if mediocrity gets rewarded and gets rewarded over a long periods of time, I can sort of see souls getting crushed by that.
Yes.
And I think that's horrible. I mean, especially if it's happening right in front of my eyes. And I think that is something where at least I have a sense that we need to be careful sometimes, because like, okay, I have a 2-year-old daughter, right? So I need to reward her for things, and I'm sure I will find a way to be balanced. And I see that, and I don't know how this relates to something like Berkeley, maybe, right? And when I say mediocrity, I'm talking about we're talking about the arts. We're not talking about playing fast or something like that, right?
Yeah, sure, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly in America, and it's really distressing to me because of the nature of our popular culture and television comes into this, and certainly, what we see on YouTube and what have you. There's a fairly dramatic race to the bottom, if you will, in terms of it's how generic can it get, and it's like standing out and being something really unique and different. I mean, goodness, when I was a kid and we had FM radio was new, and you could make the album Dark Side of the Moon and sell 50 million copies of it. Today, if a band were to present Dark Side of the Moon to any label in the world, they'd say, "You're out of your mind. I can't do anything with this. Where's the country song?" I mean, it's tragic to me because we're not rewarding creativity well enough. We're not rewarding, really coming up with something that's exceptional.
So let me try, at least try to be devil's advocate here. Okay. Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, because I'm not the kind of guy who kind of like really easily gives in to ideas like this, where I say things were better, or because I don't fundamentally, I don't believe that to be the case. But what I believe is sort of happening is that the spirit of something, like the spirit of the music business or the music that has been made in between, I don't know, whatever, 60s, 70s, right?
Yep.
Like it probably moved into some other body, into some other form. That's kind of like what I would hope. So I don't know.
It would be great, and again, the upside is there are people doing really interesting and super cool and creative things, and that's the upside. And part of the problem too is I had a discussion years ago when I was still at Lexicon, and home studios were becoming, a viable thing, right? The ADAT had come along, and the DA88, and this notion of home studios becoming really professional. One of the guys that used to run like Pro Sound News, sat down with me and said, what have we done? Have we gone too far? And I said, yeah, I think we have. And sure enough, studios one by one started going away. And the fact is, everybody can make records at home, and so they do. And so the amount of the just sheer volume of music that people have to sort through to get to something exceptional is staggering. And if there was one thing that was good about the labels back in the old days, it was that at least for a while, somebody was making some sort of quality assessment. And it may have gone from being quality to quantity, right? Somewhere in the 70s to the 80s, where we began talking about product instead of albums. But there was still some degree of somebody had to say, yes, I can work with this, or no, that's crap. We got to get rid of this. This isn't gonna,
I just heard an interesting story on the radio a couple of days ago that apparently on the 18th of September, 1978, I remember this because it's my brother's birthday.
Okay.
All the members of KISS back then, they put out solo albums on the same day, on that day.
Yep.
And they kind of like pressed a total of 32 million records, and those records were flops.
Yes.
And do you remember that? Because I
had heard do. I do. I remember well. And see, I was never a fan, but I thought this was this was sort of that era, right? Remember, all the members of Yes had done solo albums, all the members of Genesis ended up doing solo albums, and yeah, all the members of Kiss did solo albums as well. And in all cases, none of them did anything like the band that they were in, except for one, and that would be Phil Collins.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, it was, but it was a period of excess, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the stories from the studios, when the Police did their last couple albums, and they flew the whole band and crew and cocaine down to the islands to, make a record. It's like, right?
And it's so funny because like I guess people who are initially into music, like they couldn't care less about stuff like that, right?
Right.
And so
And
so
then it
that
becomes, uh, you
so
know,
yeah,
but
so
funnily enough, so speaking of studios and excess from that period, um, the so the new Burnt Belief is coming, and we actually had a plan that the pandemic foiled, which was that we were actually going to write the music the way we've been doing, sending files back and forth. But then we were going to go to a studio in London to record it and, cut the bass, drums, and guitar live, the final parts. And the studio we were going to use is Pete Townshend's Barge, which is in London. And we had mixed the Edwin Durant Covington record there a couple of years ago. Had a fantastic time, loved it. The vibe was spectacular. And I remember I was in there talking to the guy that runs it, and it suddenly dawned on me that studio for a while was actually owned by the Cocteau Twins. And he was like, okay, how did you know that? I was like, oh, see, I used to work for Lexicon, and I remember I was really into the Cocteau Twins. And when I heard they bought Pete Townshend's studio, I was like, oh, this is so cool. But
and did you end up recording there?
no, we didn't end up doing it because of the pandemic. And it's funny, Colin and I have talked about this. The fact is, the album really somehow still feels very alive to us, even though we, everybody recorded their part, remotely. And to the extent where the drums, this is really crazy, but this is where technology has taken us. Vinny's drums were recorded at his house, but the guy who recorded them went and set up the mics when Vinny was not there, then went back to his house and remotely dialed into his recording gear to record from his house when Vinny's at his house. I mean, this is the pandemic. This is what we had to do, right?
Yeah, but it's kind of true. I think it's sort of funny when people ask me about Stickman, like rehearsing or recording together. Like, hey, what are you talking about? Like, do we have any money left to spend on getting together before the tour? No,
right?
like
no. I mean, and this is the thing, right? Because you guys are in a very similar situation to Burnt Belief. Colin and I are. He's in London.
Yeah.
I'm here in Portland. Vinny's in Boston. The physical cost of putting us in the same room, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And
I think because like making a record is like making a piece of art, and I think anything goes. And the studio as like the technology, like, yeah, just let's use it, let's use it. And I recorded an album with and for an artist over the internet. Like, she's a flutist, and she's in Houston. And she had, I asked a friend, an engineer, to go to her house to set up microphones and to set up an audio movers connection to me.
Yeah.
And so we improvised together. So like her signal was sent to me in Berlin. I was treating it here in my looping setup, sent it back to her, and she was improvising to her own playing via my laptop in Berlin.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, the fact that we can even contemplate doing this, right? I mean,
Yes,
this is
yes.
it's amazing. And
So we're here with Mark Wingfield, for example. We did
mm,
that as well, but we both played at the same time. So it's funny because like there, as you know, there's the time lag, right?
yes,
And you don't really know, am I actually now playing after him or before him? You just don't know. But it's funny because you're just reacting to whatever you're hearing, right? Or you're acting, and it works. It works.
forgive me if I've missed it. Do you have something new with Mark coming, or
No,
is
no,
it out
but
already?
yeah, it's out. Like we did these things. It's a band called Tear,
Oh, okay.
and that's a duo project that we
Oh, okay.
put out
I've got a
outside of the work with Moonjum Records.
right.
So
Okay. Oh,
yeah, and
I need to get that because
yeah, and
I love his playing. He's a just fabulous player. So
yeah,
I very much want to hear that.
yeah. But like what I'm also trying to say, I think it would be great maybe to at some point make a like a kind of like not I don't want to say huge, but let's say 4 or 5 people get together on Zoom. We connect up with audio movers and we just improvise together, and everybody records their own stuff at home,
And then get
and we
compiled
just we
and
just put it together, and it doesn't matter if it's in time or not, right? Like we just
that
I
would
think
be very
that would be great.
interesting. Yeah,
Like if I'm going to do that, I will definitely ask you to take part.
that would be fun. That would be
Mhm,
really
mhm.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I, I get amazed every time I think about the fact that we can do things like this because of, how long we've been doing music, right? Remember when a 4-track cassette deck was a major step for us, right?
Mhm.
And I mean,
But the funny thing for me was that I could always imagine the future technology. It wasn't available, but I knew sort of it's going to come, because if I can think about it, if I can imagine, somebody else can.
somebody else is doing it, right?
Just doing it, yeah. So that's why somehow like this whole development, and like in the early, yeah, I was born in 72. So for me, from like say the mid 80s, I was aware of musical gear, and I
Mhm,
was visiting music stores and
mhm.
trying the Casio CZ1 on, and
Sure, yeah,
like all
yeah,
these
yeah,
things.
yeah.
And then seeing like an Atari ST with notator on it, and
Mhm.
so basically I have been part of the digitalization
Yep.
of the music, um,
Yeah,
whatever you
from
want to
the
call it,
from the beginning. Yeah.
from the beginning. But I was not so much into like I never properly recorded to tape. I mean, I did do the 4-track thing, yes, but
Mhm.
so for me, it's still something that like thinking about the great records that were made, like where people were like cutting tape.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
when
I
did when
mean,
did when did you start recording? Like, was that in the 90s, or did you do stuff
yeah,
before?
in the '90s for sure. And I had done some work in studios back in the '80s as well. Um, more with friends and musical compatriots. And I had a good friend who went to New England Conservatory, and I did some sessions in their electronic music studio there. That back in the old days when they had the wonderful old modular Moogs and buchler systems and all of that. It was great. And I brought in my old Roland guitar synth and did my Andy Summers
Do, do
chords.
you do you still have it?
I do. I do still have it. At one point I thought about selling it and I couldn't get anything for it. And I was like, well, why sell it? Just keep it. And every now and again I pull it out and it's a thing. It had such a limited amount of sonic capability. but it was still extraordinary when it happened. I mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
we think about discipline and where would we be without that album? So
Yes, yes, yes. And so there are these like more modern versions of these of that pedal, right? Which is
mhm.
the GR300, which I've been using for a few years, and the
Yeah.
GR1, which is like a small boss pedal. And
Mhm.
so just you may get a kick out of this. So I was in the studio with Gary Husband a few weeks ago,
Mhm.
and we recorded a second album together. And
Yes.
I did not bring a guitar, so that was kind of my challenge, my idea to use whatever instrument is available in the studio. And I used a Telecaster and an nylon string guitar, and I was also playing Rhodes. And
Mm.
so I put the guitar synth pedal, after the Rhodes,
Yeah.
and I was getting like these amazing sounds, like from the Rhodes going through that guitar synth pedal.
Cool.
Yeah, and
Oh,
and
that's
it's
great.
and it's that kind of attitude, let's say, that kind of experimentation that I dig when
Yeah.
people do that.
Oh,
So
totally.
and so, is there any secret, let's say, about your sound and your playing that you can share with us?
Um, well, I'll start with the fretless guitar. And there's one thing that I had added to that other fretless guitar players I've seen haven't done. And that's that I've got a Sustainiac on it. And that allows all kinds of phrasing possibility. And, because a fretless guitar doesn't sustain well in its, normal condition. And so that opens up this whole world of phrasing that wouldn't otherwise exist. I have a bunch of outboard gear that I use, and a lot of it, they're all fun, they're all cool. Some things I feel like I couldn't be without. I've got this Echolution 2 delay that I adore, and they don't make it anymore, and I'm terrified if it breaks what I'm going to do, because those of us who use long delays, um, nobody gets it. What do we do? I can't believe I never got a Lexicon PCM 42 when I was there, and and right, and now I'm like, okay, now so, but that's what it really comes down to for me with the stuff that I do that's really unusual and doesn't sound much like a guitar. It's how I combine different effects to create something that becomes completely unrecognizable. And it was funny, I did a record with Robert Irschendahl 2 years ago, I guess now. Well, when was it? We were over there 2019, and it came out last year. And he's also, using the guitar synth and doing amazing things with it. And you and I all have this great textural sense of how to manipulate sound. And what I loved was that it was completely, our approaches were so different from each other, but all in the service of trying to extend the voice of the instrument. And that's what excites me. Like when I sit down to practice, it's very rarely am I running scales or whatever. It's like I'll start and go, okay, take one note. How can I manipulate this note? And then, okay, where's the next note going to come from? And I'll start moving things around. And then eventually, where does that take me 2 hours down the line, right? Where have I gone from here to here? And that's the exciting part of making music for me is that.
So with the fretless guitar, when like the lead playing, Do you go direct like with that guitar into your computer nowadays, or?
Sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. I've been using the Strymon Iridium as an amp simulator into the computer. I've also got an amp that Fender Princeton that sounds great, and I'll use that sometimes as well. But a lot of it is direct now. Uh, there's nothing like the feel of an amplifier and having your pant legs move and the movement of air and feeling like, and especially the fretless, because of the Sustainiac, I can do all kinds of, I can get the sustain I want. On a regular guitar, I like the feedback, I spent so much time with David Torn. We're the people that just, I need to feel there's a physical connection between, when the air starts getting out of the amp back into the guitar and it begins to really move. And that feeling is pretty irreplaceable.
Mm-hmm. I went, we with Sigmund went to using in-ears like maybe 6 years ago or so.
Yes.
And it was that time also when I started using the AU8 model of touch guitars, which is a semi-acoustic instrument. And it was fascinating because I was also at the beginning, I was thinking I need that feedback kind of, and that and it was kind of true, but then I got used to it, to the way the instrument is reacting without the sound source, the speaker on stage. But then I remember there was like one gig at a place called, I think in Belgium, the Spirit of 66 is the name of the venue. And that was like one of the most amazing shows. And then later I learned why, because the instrument was feedbacking, because I was so close to the PA.
Right.
And it just felt so amazing, like everything was shaking. And since I control like the noise gating with my foot anyway, right? Yep. It really is kind of like, it's such a joy to have that intensity, that electricity available.
Funnily enough, this week, in fact, I think probably tomorrow, I'm working on something new with Stefan, and there's one piece that we're doing a new version of one of the tunes from our duo album, and he wanted to use the solo from that, and I thought, no, I need to do a new solo. We can't do the same thing. And he was like, but it's so magical, and I had done direct with the regular guitar. He's like, sound just isn't the same. I said, I know. Look, my wife just left town this morning. Okay, I'm going to crank up the amplifier and off we'll go. Okay.
So when I first worked with Robert Rich in 2006 or 7, we did this album called 11 Questions.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things we did for that album, Ambient album, was to record as loud as possible. So everything was super loud in the studio. And you wouldn't be able to tell, I think, if you listen to the record, but it creates a completely different vibe.
There's, it is. It's a funny thing, but we're musicians, we can play, we can put the headphones on, and I know what the notes I want to play, and I know what the feel is going to be, and I can do all of those things, and I can get a really good recording. There's just something about movement of air. It's still really,
Yeah.
We interact with it, and it changes how you think, it changes how you feel, and it's bad for our hearing, I know, and and that's all true. And we, I don't know, I've been minimizing how much I do that, but every now and again, there's just no getting around it. You just.
So how are you making these decisions, which sound to use, which pieces of gear to use? as you said, it's part of the creative process for you, right?
It is. And, it's sometimes it will be right there. Like there's one tune on our crossings, Sunrise, that Stefan came up. He woke up in the morning and had this musical idea in his head.
Mhm.
Put it down that day, sent it to me, and he's 9 hours ahead of me.
Mhm.
Sent it to me. I woke up, had this thing in my inbox, put it on, and I knew immediately what my part was going to be. I mean, just, it was right there, what I was going to do, what the sound was going to be, how I was going to play it, how I would phrase things. And it was just magic. Other times you have to play something and go, no, that's not right. That's not right. Maybe this other guitar, or, no, fretless isn't right for this one. I want to dig in a little bit and use a regular. And then other times you start one way and end up another way. And it's just part of the creative process. It's to me, it's rare when it all is like right there, blindingly obvious. It's a great feeling when it happens. It's like, he and I still marvel over that, that one piece, just because for both of us, it was just this moment of inspiration that, it's fabulous.
Yeah, I'm sometimes forcing myself into situations like that. Like, so for example, sometimes like people are shocked to see that I don't have a studio setup. And
Mhm.
on one hand, I would really like to have one so I can just sit down and work. But then it really is not the way that I work. The way that I work is that I need to have limited options in order to start working somehow.
Mhm.
So, and that's why, like I said, like I decided to go to the studio to record with Gary, and I didn't take my guitar because I wanted to see what's going to happen. And I take like a couple of pedals. So I'm always trying to kind of like restrict my palette,
Sure.
right? So in order to be inspired, and usually what happens then is what you just described, that there is like this, because like I can't really prepare myself for what is going to happen. What then happens is something that is
Really fresh.
really fresh, but also appropriate somehow.
Yeah.
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 Because that's kind of like the biggest challenge, I think, as a musician, is to find the part that's appropriate. Because
Yeah.
and I can always go back, like talking of Stefan, right? Like he said, "Oh, can you play a solo just like that one back then?" And I said, "Yeah, I could, but I don't want to." Right? Like,
Exactly. Well, he has the composer hat, with the capital C,
yeah.
and he wears it really well.
Mhm.
And it's a funny thing, is we're now into the thing we're doing. That'll be our our fourth project in the last year and a half together. So I'm more improvisational, and he's much more structured. And so he's thinking, oh, this is exactly the vibe, and I'm like, yeah, but let me try something new. It's an interesting dynamic, though. And but this new thing is very cool. I'm looking forward to getting your ears around it. You're gonna enjoy it.
Yeah,
So,
he sent me some stuff already.
oh, cool.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. You have an idea. Cool.
Yes, very good. Hey, so the Burnt Belief album, the new one, when is it going to be out?
October 22nd.
Mhm.
And
on your label?
on Alchemy. Yep.
And meaning mostly Bandcamp, or what is your
Mostly
page
Bandcamp,
out?
but it will be on Burning Shed, and various, all the digital download
Yeah,
sites
yeah,
will be there too.
yeah.
So, but but yeah, I'm really excited about this because it's been a little while since we did a Burnt Belief album, and it kind of happened by accident because I had done this record where I was playing piano for most of it, and it was the idea was like you were doing with the Rhodes and running it through your synth. I was running my digital piano through my guitar rig and getting all kinds of interesting sounds and textures, and did a whole record using that. And then after I finished it, I started another piece that I really liked, but I didn't really want to go down the same path. And so I sent it to Colin just as oh, hey, I've just done this thing. What do you think? And he said, oh, this is great. You want some bass? And I said, yeah, lovely. And he said, I've been playing upright a lot lately because, he's had for years a gig in a club playing jazz standards, playing upright, and just kind of when he's not on the road with people, he has this regular gig that he loves. And with the pandemic, he's not doing that. And upright bass you have to work at, otherwise your chops go away. So he had been spending a while woodshedding on it, and he said, what if we try to do like a whole record with me playing upright this time? And I said, great, bring it on, let's go. And so the last piece on the record was Where It Began, and then we did the opening tune. A lot of our pieces, I'll do like a soundscapey thing, right? One of my cloud guitar things. And he'll then take that, and often he'll like run it through a slicer to create a rhythmic pattern out of my textural guitar stuff that didn't previously have any rhythm, right? And that's one of the secret sauces of Burnt Belief, was that's how a lot of pieces begin. And then, then we flush them out from there as a composition. So the opening tune on the record, he didn't end up doing any slicing on it. He just he felt like it was this wonderful textural thing. And he just gave me a bunch of phrases on his bass. And immediately I had the picture in my head of the first Terry Ripdahl, Jack DeJohnette, Miroslav Vitous record. And so I sampled the original bit of drums that start the record and looped that, and then used that as a pilot for Vinny's drums, and created this piece that sort of, it's a total homage to Terry Ripdahl, who's like one of my all-time heroes. And it came out great. It totally feels like, the band is all there together, and we've got Alexei Sax on trumpet, and it's fabulous. He's great.
He's great.
A great player.
Yeah, I was going to ask who TR is, so now I know who TR is.
Yes, it's Terry Ripdahl.
Yeah.
And now it all makes sense, right? It's like, yeah, Terry Ripdahl for me was, again, when I'm first playing electric guitar, and this is 1978. Holdsworth is around, Steve Morse is around, Al Di Meola, all these people playing all these notes. And Terry Ripdahl came out with this album, Waves, where with one note, he completely changed how I viewed the electric guitar. Just leveled me. And I, to this day, I still, every time I listen to that record, I think this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. So, yeah. So, but then, and then a lot of the other pieces they begin with Colin just having an idea for either he takes my, does the slicing thing with my textures, and then does like a bass line and a drum part. And then I take that and build a tune out of it. And then eventually it goes back to him, and maybe he'll add another part. And then eventually we kind of settle on, okay, here's the form. And then we go and redo all of our parts. So
it's a really, really interactive process of composition.
Yes, totally.
Like And the title of the album is Mutual Isolation, which
Yes.
also makes sense, right?
Yes, it is an absolute, it is exactly what was happening. You know, we were all mutually isolated and not very happy about it by that point, you know, because by the time we started working on it, we'd all been locked down for at least 6 months. I'm trying to think of when we started. It was, yeah, it had been at least, because it was fall of last year. So yeah, but yeah, so we'd been locked down for 6 months and we were all tired of it. And we had, you know, again, we had this idea, we're gonna cut it live in the end, right? We'll go through the writing process. But no, the world had other plans. So
yeah, like I'm really fascinated by the amount, but also the quality of the music that my circle of friends has put out in the past 16 months or so.
it's been fascinating to watch, hasn't it? You have a wonderful breadth of friends that are really doing a lot. And I think I was discussing with somebody else that there have been sort of two camps. One has been they shut down, their brains shut down, and they said, I can't deal with this, and I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to go. And then the others have been, well, I have nothing, literally nothing else I can do. So I'm going to make music. So, you know, it's been interesting, but it's been crazy how much has really happened. And what's great too is that it's all, for me, it's been really interesting people that I've known for a long time, but haven't worked with. And that's been the great part.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, like on the level of my teaching, for example, like I discovered some people come like in a completely new way because of the lockdowns and people were working from home. So they actually had time, like probably the time that they were commuting otherwise, you know, and they were like taking lessons or having meetings. And I realized at that point, like these guys, because sometimes I can be kind of like very, how should I say this? Like I can be quite prejudiced about people who kind of like talk the talk or walk the walk, right? That kind of thing. But realizing that in a lot of cases I was wrong. And that was actually very nice to experience that people really found the energy to kind of like go out there and do the things that they were planning to do for a long time, and they actually did it. And I think that's amazing. And it's an amazing outcome of these challenging times, I find, you know. And just going back to the beginning of the this whole affair with COVID that we all have,
right?
You know that I was in Japan, and that's
yes,
where,
I know.
like, and you know the very first lockdown album in our circles was the one with Gary Husband,
with Gary and you, which is I can't tell you how much I love that album. It is just fantastic, and it really it was so perfect for the moment, and has remained so for me. It has
really? Wow.
It has really hit just the right note. And what's great about the recording is I would have loved to have been there in the studio watching this go down, but you almost feel like the presentation of it is, you almost feel like you are anyway. It really is such a beautiful, intimate record. And it's funny, it paralleled at the time you did that, or the time you released it. I was in the middle of doing my record with Peter Chilvers, and they're very similar in a lot of ways. And you know, certainly the spirit is really, we were all in exactly this. It was a very introspective time when we're all sort of looking inside ourselves and going, okay, I'm really uncertain about the state of the world right now and my place in it. And the music that you did and that I did in these cases was really very intimate and really, yeah.
Isn't it amazing how it's almost like how we almost anticipated that feeling, because like really it was the very early days.
Yes.
Yeah, but
it was. I mean, you were so, it was so early that you weren't even sure you were going to get home, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is how crazy all of it was, and I remember reading that you were over there and that you had the one show and then everything got canceled, and I was thinking, these poor guys have to be wondering, how am I getting home? What's, and all of that, just you were so fortunate to be able to walk into the studio and do that when you could.
Yeah.
And get it.
I mean, there's quite a bit of backstory to that as well. But what I think is worth mentioning, that so the album was recorded there in Tokyo, and really the moment when it struck me what had really happened was when I was at Narita Airport going back home. Was that the airport was empty. And it's an airport where I was used to having like 2 million people running around.
Sure.
Like, was there? At least that's what it felt like,
Right.
And that was the moment. It was after recording the album where it dawned on me, okay, this is severe, right?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I think things have changed, and I have actually taken a few flights in the past couple months. And I felt safe enough so that I think I would do it again.
Yeah.
And so let's see. I mean, I hope there's.
Yeah, we've been back and forth, across the country to our other home, and my wife just left this morning, and it's okay. We're vaccinated, and you wear your mask, and it's okay. But I was supposed to be playing the the Vilgens Guitar Festival in Estonia next week. And I bailed. I said, I just don't feel like I can do an international flight right now. Especially when I don't know, will I get turned around because I'm American? Will I be, all of the uncertainty surrounding it. It didn't make sense yet. And I'm really sad because I love playing with Robert and Alexei, but next year, that's what we hope for.
But it's true that the intercontinental stuff is really hard to pull off in this situation.
Yes.
And in a way, it's a little bit sad because that was what I was doing.
Yes. Yes.
So
yeah, for a long time you've been putting a lot of miles on, around the globe. And I mean,
it was nine years.
Yeah.
9 years of touring with Pat and Tony.
Yeah.
And it seems like we will be back in April in the US.
Great.
But you can never be 100% sure.
But right now, I say, I certainly hope you will be, and I hope we're all ready to go. I felt so weird. I went to the symphony here in Portland on Saturday, and I'm still really uncomfortable being around people, and it felt really strange. And it was so nice to see, music, and but oof.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a like, getting traumatized about, or being traumatized about the very human need of being close to other people is kind of dangerous.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And that to me is that's the part that's been so hard about all of this is that human connection, physical human connection that we've avoided feels really weird to me. And there are things that I really long for again, and that's really one of them, you know. So
yeah, let's hope that we will be able to heal on that level, you know.
yes, yes, yeah, it's going to be necessary because they're healing. Boy, there's a whole lot of that needs to happen, and it's not just the pandemic. There's been a lot of a lot of breakdowns amongst people that need to get repaired, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And one of the nice things, though, is one of the things that can help heal that is music.
I agree.
It's one of the things that I think if everyone universally said, what's the one thing we can all agree needs to happen? It's music. It's that, you know, sense of what happens when music is happening. Something, you know, something hugely positive happens to people.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah. So let's make sure that we make live music happen again.
Yes, for sure.
It's our duty.
It is, right? It is, and to ourselves as well as to those who listen.
Yeah,
exactly. It really is, and definitely.
You know, Gary Husband, he told me that he said that quite a few of his colleagues are kind of like thinking of quitting.
Sure.
And,
yes.
And it's I don't even need to comment on that.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. I mean, Vinny, his gigs went from 150 a year to nothing, and he didn't know what to do with himself. And if I didn't have a new burnt belief for him to wrap his head around, he was on the verge of being devastated. And just giving him something to look forward to was huge. And I'm really happy I was able to do that. And his playing on the album, good grief, he nailed it and did it in a way that was, you can tell he was just like, I need this so badly right now. But it's true. And I know, I mean, Gary used to, play with Steve Hunt and Alan's band, and Steve, I know, he played on my brother's album, and we're working on a new one. And he's teaching at Berkeley, and that's now back on. But he's incredibly frustrated with where things are. I know that, and it's bad. It's On the other hand, every time, I open my inbox and have something new from somebody, I think, oh, it's going to be a good day. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Okay. I think like I'm for myself, I'm only scratching the surface of you, because I'd like to know more, but let's leave it at that for today.
Okay.
And let give people a chance to kind of like listen to your music and digest the conversation, but also to listen to your wonderful playing and your work over decades. We have to say.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
Yes. And thank you so much. And
thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Yeah, this is such a good time. I really, really enjoy this. So.
Yeah, in a way, this is one of my responses to the situation. just finally talk to the people that you always wanted to talk to. And
Just sit and talk. I mean, because you and I, the times we have sat and talked, there's always been this or that, and and so it's just great to just sit and have an actual conversation. It's lovely.
I tell you a secret. So I'm one of those people who kind of like, I really feel other people's presence. Like, so like if somebody stands close enough to me, I get this. And I do remember your presence very well. I do remember your physical presence, and that's
short as I am.
That's a compliment. Well, but that's a compliment. I really, and I felt, and you do not have your presence is not short, not at all. People wouldn't be able to tell, like watching our faces on Zoom.
Hey, look,
so that was the one secret you gave away. Hey, thank you so much, my friend. And
thank you. This is great. We'll talk again.
Talk to you soon. Yes. Bye.